Hello and welcome to another Discussing Fitchburg Now show with me, your host, Sam Squailia. This week we have because of National Women's History Month, we're going to be talking about women. All right. So this show it is entitled Fierce and Fabulously Fitchburg Females on FATV. And that's what you're watching right now, FATV. And that's thanks to the Workers Credit Union virtual studios. We are here, still in our living rooms and our bedrooms, coming to you in your living room and your bedroom. All right, so we're breaking this show up into two halves. Kenisha Coy, the wonderful, the amazing Kenisha Coy, will be co-hosting with me. And so up our first segment, we will have Jennifer Jones, the Fitchburg Cultural Alliance, long-time president, treasurer. She has done all the roles in the Fitchburg Cultural Alliance. She's also a composer and a community arts activist. And we have in our first segment, Coe McIninich. She is the first LGBTQIA chairperson of the Fitchburg Cultural Council. Thanks, guys, for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right, so this is a discussion really on kind of women in leadership positions, women in arts and culture, women through the ages, right? This is an open kind of discussion on our feelings and our opinions on women's issues in Fitchburg. Right, Kenisha?
Absolutely. And again, thank you for having us. I just think it's so important to recognize the women in our community. I am on my doctorate pursuit, and I had the pleasure and the privilege of being able to speak to some youth. And I came across a youth who was saying, well, women aren't researchers. And that broke my heart, because she continued, she's like, no, only guys can do research. Only guys. I know, but women can research and we can do art. She's like, no, but only guys get paid more than women. So that's what matters more. And I'm like, well, what you said is true. Men do get paid more usually, but that doesn't mean that we can't. And it doesn't mean that we don't push for better. So that got me thinking about the women in my community, because often I think we look outside of ourselves and we compare ourselves and we devalue ourselves. And I was thinking about the wonderful women in this community. I was thinking about you, Sam, who I think is an artist on so many levels. I was thinking about Coe, who I've had the privilege of working with on cultural council. And really we have a really funky story. I don't know if we'll be able to get it. There's a funky fun story of how we connected. And Jennifer Jones, who is just amazing. When I first moved here, she was one of the first women that just embraced me. And often we hear how women are catty, and yeah, there is an element to that, but there is also an element that I think we need to accentuate, which is women are wonderful, and let's lean more into us pushing the positivity and leaning into supporting each other, as opposed to the divisiveness that is well known. So
before we continue, I forgot that Kenisha has some more titles than just the amazing and wonderful. Kenisha was also the first African American chair of the Fitchburg Cultural Council, and she was the 2019 Heroine of the Year. What does that mean, Kenisha? What does it mean to be the Heroine of the Year?
It was a surprise. I got a call from the State House, and I thought it was someone joking and pranking me, because I have friends who do that. They suck and they're lovely all at the same time. But I did get a call from the State House, and they said, congratulations, you are our 2019 heroine in your area. I have a nonprofit, which is my CARE initiative, Community Arts Research Education. I am enthusiastic and passionate about art and its ability to help heal and change, transform our lives. So it was recognized that the work that we're doing in the community, even though we're a small nonprofit, we are growing, and our art infusions with healing is something that we got a shout out. So thank you, State House.
Congratulations, you make us look good.
Thank you. Yeah, I try.
So to lead kind of discussion, during National Women's History Month, right? So, on social media, you get the people that like to say things they would never say to your face. And one discussion was, why do we even need, a Women's History Month? Why don't we have a Men's History Month? And and now in this time, we have more women that are working. We have more women than ever are getting college degrees and enrolled in college. In fact, I think right now we have more women that obtain college degrees and are enrolled in college than men at this time. We're seeing more women in elected positions. We're seeing more women in board leadership positions. Why do we still need to discuss women in leadership roles?
It's such a big thing that there's so much to answer for that one.
Yeah.
So that with the people that say, why do we still need Women's History Month? It's because the women from all different parts of besides culture wise, I mean, there's totally written out of history. So you can read history books, which are traditionally written kind of on the people who won, who at the time, the people that had power in America tended to be white male. But then you can read the letters of the women and read the entire backstory of what was going on politically. And it's a whole nother fascinating story. In the arts, there are so many women who never got recognition, but are incredible. And they're just coming up to light now. So between regular just Women's History Month, a cultural perspective on women who are still not being heard every single day or being misunderstood, that's a whole nother extra discussion. But women in general, yeah, historically in the art world, did not get any recognition. And just in American history, in art history, we're still not getting heard. You have to still claw. And part of that cattiness we talk about is trying to find that space and get that small toehold to be able to move up and just do what you want to do that you're passionate about.
So I guess we need a Women's History Month just to catch up and to catch up on the equality issue.
Well, this is where I wish I was back in with Colin and her age, because as someone that has lived through the 70s and all of the changes that have been made, and some of the things that the civil rights that have given women more equity, there's still a lot of gender bias. But at the same token, I see that we're moving forward, and women's history is one of those things, is that we're beginning to recognize not only just the importance of women in our society, but what's happened. It kind of runs parallel to Black Lives Matter. I sort of see this too as this we've been invisible. And I know, as someone who went to college in the late 60s and worked in the 70s, how invisible I was. I was a pretty face, and that's all I was to many people. And there weren't as many women graduating college, and there weren't as many women as there are now that are CEOs or heading up companies. So in a sense, I said, gee, it'd be fun to step in Colin's shoes and at her age and say, wow, moving forward, there's how can I affect that change even more? But I think that it's the more that we educate ourselves, and the more that we see what's going on, the truth, then maybe we can get to the bottom of some of these systemic inequities that have been with us for so long.
What are some improvements that you've seen, Jen? As you're a generation older, what improvements have you seen back, from the 70s to today?
Well, I've seen it in the workplace. I think that there's there's still a sexual harassment. There's no question, but I think there's, particularly with the younger generation, I see it with my stepson, who is 50, so he's not young, but he was a Mr. Mom. He raised his kids while his wife went to medical school. I see so many examples of that, where we see that men have really stepped up to the plate I mean, my husband never even felt that changing a diaper was beneath him, you know. But that's the way it was, you know, that's the way it had been. But now I see, you know, so many men who embrace women in the workplace and embrace women in what they do. So there, I see that. I also see that, you know, as far as the economy and big business, there, you know, women really have a say now in the economy and the stock market. I mean, we're still not as represented as most of these companies are still male driven. But I think that women, now that there's so many of us in the workforce, that we can boycott a product and people will listen. And so I think there's a more leverage there that we have. You know, there's a lot of areas. I think what I really am saddened about is the abuse that's still going on, and the trafficking of women, and they're just so much of that is just what happened recently with the hate crimes that are happening. I you know, with the Asian women and this horrible tragedy, it's, you know, we seem to hear more and more about that. And that really saddens me. I don't know. We've got a lot of work to do.
Under the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, they now have a human trafficking division, a whole department just dedicated to, you know, to prosecuting human trafficking concerns in the state of Massachusetts. That's how serious.
That
you
is
know
something.
What? That is amazing, and that goes right to the question that you just asked that Jen Jones was answering, Sam. That's a major change. Even 5 years ago, talking about sex trafficking in Massachusetts, people were unwilling to even address that this exists. I have friends who, I mean, for many of you know that one of the things that we do in my nonprofit, we break through silence. We address art and we connect art with healing from abuse trauma. And I was talking to, he's a male friend. He identifies as a male. He's like, well, we don't even have to deal with this in America. I'm like, oh, oh my dear. Okay, all right. And I had to kind of dial back within my horror because not everybody is aware of this. And then to be able to talk to him about the stats that are very, very prevalent within America and within this state, how you can order a female on Craigslist, or how you could have at one time. And that's within our direct lifetime. And one of the benefits of Women's History Month and us being able to gather together is even 10 years ago, this wasn't something that was readily, easily done. But it's improvements in awareness, and going back to what Jen was saying, education. Education is a major motivation of being able to be inclusive. And then art is a connector as to how do we break into subcultures and be able to break through perspectives and belief systems, and allow people to understand that they shouldn't be shamed by their ignorance, but they hopefully will encourage them to learn more about their community and issues that are related within. So yeah, that sex trafficking thing is very real.
Yeah.
I would like to say one thing that, like, Jen, when you talk about my generation, I mean, it was born in early 1970. So there's this huge change of the entire internet that hit. And there's something about that technology in and of itself has empowered conversations. And I know that Kenisha's studying is very much on narratives in community and things like that. And people's narratives, some of them we may not agree with. All the stories are shared out there now. We have the ability to just say our truth a lot more than ever. And so the things that you never knew existed, you'll figure it out, the good, bad, and the ugly. But in the past few years, we've had the ability to have really difficult conversations. You know, if you watch just the transition of LGBTQ rights in America, just the ridiculous, massive growth of that opened up difficult conversations. And I think we've been able to start and negotiate conversations and learn to dial back and have those conversations with people and share the stories. And art is a huge, huge part of that, where if you can't necessarily express what you're saying, somebody can look at your art and start the conversation with that. But just the ability to say something. I mean, women make up what, 51% of America? We do not represent 51% of the culture and the community in America, but it's half of the country.
Yeah,
Half the country, like where are we? And even in the museums, women weren't in most of the museums. Like there was what, 10% of women in the museums?
Yeah.
And now we had a chance to voice that and say something, and the female artists got a chance to step forward. So the massive amount of representation just because of technology and the internet is ridiculous. You know, people ask, why do we need the Women's History Month right now? I'm like, because their stories are here now. Like their stories weren't here. Like, listen, they're out there. Just focus on one crowd for a minute, just for 1 month. You know, let's all talk about these stories. So I'm sorry, I just dialed that right around the entire conversation we're having.
So what are we shooting for? You know, you said, you know, in the United States, women make up 51% of the population. You know, what's the goal? Is the goal 50% representation? Because I remember Ruth Bader Ginsburg was asked, you know, there are 4 women on the Supreme Court. How do you feel? She says, I'll be happy when there are 9.
There are 9.
Something like that. You know, what's the goal?
I wouldn't say that it's like full control of everything, but the point is, I think the goal would be that we don't have to have a situation where somebody asks.
Yes.
Like, you know, it's one of those things like, you know, why are there no women on this panel about, you know, women's medical issues? That's a question you ask. But when you get on a committee, like, I don't think it should be an issue of why is that woman on the committee? I don't want to walk into a room and count how many women are there to see if I'm the only one, and to see and judge how I'm going to have to act in this meeting by that. I want to be able to walk into a meeting as an equal to the people in the room and not have to think about it. Because when I walk in and there's 2 women in a room full of 12 men who are like the same color skin and the same socioeconomical class, then I readjust the way I'm going to speak in the meeting. So that's my goal, is that, like, and also at the same time, anybody of any gender or any gender spectrum whatsoever should be able to come into a room and not have to assess. Anybody from any nationality doesn't want to have to come in and go, great, I'm speaking for my race. Like, that shouldn't have to happen. So those are things I would love to see. Yeah, I hope that happens before I die. I guess that's what I'm saying. Sorry.
That's one example where diversity would be a strength, right?
You need all those voices at the table, all those stories. It's a big country.
And for it to be understood that women's history is not only for women, just like Black history is not only for persons of African descent, just like Irish or St. Patrick's Day is not only for people who are from Ireland. You know, it's just this, we are a composite. So this is all of our history as Americans. So when we can, like Coe was saying, we can enter a space and not have it fully designated to, oh, well, this is a Black issue, well, this is a quote unquote gay issue, well, this is a woman's issue. And like, oh, these are our issues. And it might affect this populace directly, but it still affects us all indirectly. And to be able to come to the table with that understanding is so key. So I think our measurements need to be evaluated, not us versus them, but us and them, and who else.
Yes.
Yeah.
In a you know, in equity and inclusion, you know, if you, there's one thing to have a seat at the table, but there's another thing to be welcomed at that and included at that table.
Absolutely.
Right? So like if you're just one woman out of 12 men, you know, you feel, sometimes you can feel a little out of place.
Yeah, often.
I think you because, you know, because of your past experience, you expect to have to prove yourself before you can just say before you can just get to the point of whatever the meeting was. And that's unfair. I think that happens with a lot of people. If you are the one in the crowd, and I guess, you know, all of us sitting here, we've had to sit at those tables where we are not necessarily the person who's usually in power, or historically, whether like Jen Jones, you walk in, if you're part of a museum situation, you know, there's this entire upper echelon of the history of museums, and you have to come in and like show mention every place you've worked, every committee you're on, and your experience before you actually get to the conversations. And those things need to change. And I believe that they're gradually changing. I mean, we all have those stories, Kenisha, you were talking about, you know, it's not just a gay issue. It's not just a color issue, whichever. It's all about the community. We have, for too long, I think, maybe worked with that word tolerance. Ugh. rather than I don't want to tolerate the person next to me. If I'm sitting in a meeting with you, I am not tolerating you. Right. I'm accepting you and realizing that you're a part of the community.
Absolutely.
And I think we all know so much after this past year of some people can't get by, some people can't. That the only way you move forwards is community. So wherever you are, whoever you are, wherever you came from, whatever you're doing, now however you look like, we're all living together in the same area. We're gonna have to get along. I think art is a really great way to bridge that gap by people's, you know, cultural art, people's music, people's, you know, just the way they express themselves, the way they dress. Fitchburg is a huge melting pot of so many different cultures, but it's one community. So,
you know, it's funny because one of the questions is, you know, what is a community? What do you think of when you hear the word community? And, you know, and I really had to think about that because, you know, the different communities, you know, there's a community you live in, there's a community that's in the building that you're in, there's a community, you know, of like-minded individuals. And so but in the context of art and culture, I was thinking in Fitchburg, you know, I was thinking that, you know, we need, it's about knowing who we are as a community. And I don't think we fully explored that, and whether we can really do that as a community, I think would be something that I think we should try, because we still don't have enough people at the table in our community. But I think about, as Co just said, art and culture is that bridge that can take us, that can help us solve problems, that can bring people together, that is, you know, no one need to apply. Everyone can somehow participate in a democratic way. It's non-threatening, or can be non-threatening. And also people then through that can share who they are, and maybe we can get to know our community that way. And so I think that this is, you know, there still is work that has to be done around getting to know who it is that's in our community. We have to know each other. We have to have a sense of, do I have your back? Does she have my back? And how can we support each other? And I know that the Fitchburg Cultural Alliance that I've been a part of for so long, where we've really been when Jason Harris Fitzgerald was our president, we now have Jessie Olson, which I'm thrilled about. But Jason brought a whole sense of community, his ideas of community to the table. And it gave me a lot of food for thought, and some of our members food for thought, as far as how we can engage, how the Fitchburg Cultural Alliance can engage that community around the commonalities, or around those things that, you know, the arts and culture that can open up the dialogue. And he you know, from his experiences, and you know, was able to share that. And I'm very much myself want in the next few years, that's what I really want to work on. I really want to do what I can to help do that, because it's important.
That's a perfect segue, Jen, for, you know, our final thoughts in this first half of the show is kind of what action steps should we take? You know, instead of, to allow us to accept people rather than just tolerate them, right? Yeah. What are some good action steps that we should take?
Oh, well, I have a shirt on. I don't know if you guys can see it, but so my shirt reads, "Real queens fix each other's crowns."
Ooh, that's
I
awesome.
like that.
And I think that is so necessary. And
Mhm.
Coe and I, we get into these really, actually most of the people on our panel, we get into these really engrossing conversations. And it's like, well, getting away or steering away from that crab mentality. Oh, I have light, and if I can't shine, I don't want Sam to succeed, because if Sam succeeds, that means I can't. You know, we have to get away from these mental stigmas and these, I call them energy leeches of thought. Of, well, if another woman is succeeding, if another person is succeeding, it means I can't. No, let's do away with that destructive paradigm. Let's create and craft a new story. Sorry, so I'm just saying, let's be inclusive. Let's bring our own experiences, as well as not invalidating others' experiences.
Exactly, exactly.
I think there's something also too about, I think we were talking a little bit about youth and things like that. There was a student I met from the high school that was afraid to write because she didn't know that there was anybody else in town that wrote, and she just thought that she couldn't make money at it. Oh my God, that's not the point. But I think those are times also when we can see that the women around us and the younger women, older women, whatever, that have voices that they don't get a chance to raise. I think being cognizant enough to look around and see that, and then uplift the people into the community to build strength, to empower people who have been just too quiet or have thought that they had to stay quiet. I think those are really important, and that builds the strength in the community. Because once you bring someone in, they bring their friends in too. You can create all new things you never even dreamed of, which is good.
One-on-one, bring people in and make them feel comfortable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jen, any thoughts?
Oh, are we ending this first half hour?
Yes.
Us as a trio? I don't know.
What we should do.
Oh, action items. Well, I think I sort of mentioned one when I was talking previously about thinking how we can get more people at the table, and how we do that deliberately and intentionally, and through obviously the bridge of arts and culture. And we have so many already in this community that are wonderful artists and musicians and writers. And I thought to myself, would it great to have an event of all, of people, sort of an open mic or open anything, to bring others out to be part of it. I'm not sure what that event or thing would be, but I think we do need to look at this at a much broader level. But then, as you just said, it's one person at a time too. It's finding that sweet spot, about that person and what they can contribute. And so I don't think we
see that event once we're all vaccinated and out in the
and
community.
we're all, I know, well, this is where we're just also stir crazy. I know I am, but we're ready. We're ready.
We're ready to get out in the community and start supporting each other more than we ever did.
Yeah.
I like it. All right.
Anyway.
Well, thank you so much, Jen Jones and Coe McIninich, for coming on and chatting with me, Kenisha and I.
Oh, thank all of you. Thank you for having us, and Kenisha for this brilliant idea.
All right, so we are going to take a short break here on FATV, and we will be back after the break with Audrey Pendleton Chow, the co-chair of the Fitchburg Cultural Council, and also of Curious Escape Rooms. Hopefully they open soon. And we have Jessie Olson, who is the president of the Fitchburg Cultural Alliance, and she's also part of the Fitchburg Art Museum. So we'll see them, and we'll see you very shortly. Hello and welcome back to the second half of Discussing Fitchburg Now, Fierce and Fabulously Fitchburg Females on FATV. You're watching Discussing Fitchburg Now with me, your host, Sam Squailia. And our second half here, we have Kenisha Coy, yet again, co-hosting. And then we also have Jessie Olson and Audrey Pendleton Chow. Thanks, guys, for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Jessie Olson, she is the membership and events manager at the Fitchburg Art Museum, and she is also a Fitchburg Art Steward. She's on the Fitchburg Cultural Council and the president of the Fitchburg Cultural Alliance.
Thank you.
Audrey, we have Audrey. She is the owner of Curious Escape Rooms, hopefully opening soon after this pandemic ceases to exist. And she is also the co-chair of the Fitchburg Cultural Council. All right, so we have some more prominent women in leadership positions here, Kenisha, during our discussion and during National Women's History Month on women in leadership positions. Is that right?
That is correct. Again, want to thank Sam for her hospitality on her great show. She's doing, I think, phenomenal work in our city. And there's so many dovetails with Sam and what she's doing and her own artistry. So thank you for allowing us the opportunity.
Oh, well, anytime. So one thing we were discussing before we started recording the show was kind of a feeling or a situation that occurs almost to all women, I'd say, where women tend to compare themselves to one another. They tend to, kind of attack other women that you might feel like a competitiveness with, a kind of tear them down first kind of attitude with women way more than men do. Why do you think that is? Why do women feel the need to compare each other?
Well, I think that we're pitted against each other. Men have had kind of a head start on women in terms of being in the professional fields, in which they just hire more people like themselves, whether they actually know them in advance via nepotism or hiring their friends, but also just people that fit into their environment, which might just be other men, in which they reserve one seat at the table, if they even do that, for one woman or one minority, in which women, a minority, feel like that they have to fight each other for it, and so that pits us against each other for no reason, really. Hopefully we are getting more and more opportunities to not just fight for scraps, but be at tables where women, minorities, people of all sorts of backgrounds and abilities and types of people are welcomed at the table to create more encompassing products that meet people's needs.
Yeah.
I was inspired by Kenisha's video, and I was like, I've got things to say.
Well, I also think there is something to the fact that, I mean, not to buy into a cliche, but women are very sensitive. And I think in a lot of times we're very self-critical. And when you're self-critical, one easy way to act out on that is to deflect and criticize others. And there's so much pressure on women to look a certain way. You have to work that much harder to compete with the male in the room. You have to be twice as smart. You have to work twice as hard. And so when that pressure's on you, a defensive stress release is to just project it onto the other women because their armor is a little softer and they're not going to fight you back. So I think we all do that. Well, I can speak for myself, but when we're hurt, we hurt others. But at the same time, I think what I've been blessed with and working in the arts, especially whether it's a theater project or even just working on a party, is when you all come together and you have a common goal, and then the teamwork happens. And then when you see people as individuals and it's not as competition, you can realize what the synergy is. And then you're like puzzle pieces coming together or fabric coming together to weave a tapestry.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, the kind of, Audrey, you mentioned that maybe these, kind of actions and reactions are media driven, but I feel like it's often the way that the differences that we raise little girls compared to little boys. You know, having like a girl, in preschool age, I would, she liked Ninja Turtles. So I was like, all right, great, awesome. Ninja Turtles, all about that. Bob the Builder. Oh, you got it. All Bob the Builder stuff. And then she goes to school and the teachers say something like, those are boys' sneakers. Like those Ninja Turtle sneakers. Like, Mama, can you get me new sneakers? These are boys' sneakers. No, those are just sneakers. And I feel like we treat boys and girls differently right from the beginning. Maybe a boy falls down and it's like, get up, stop being a baby. Girl falls down, oh, my little baby, oh, my sweetie, honey. But, is it, should we be changing the way that we treat little children? Is that part of why women, kind of are so sensitive?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you were talking about of like, no, those are boys' shoes, those aren't girls' shoes, but they're just shoes. It's just marketing, of course, right? The pink aisle.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I think media does play a big role in that, because like it teaches us what it means to be a girl, what it means to be a boy often, and then it's perpetuated in society. But also it's also like traditions, right? Like, oh, the woman is supposed to be in the kitchen and the man is supposed to go out and work.
This is what my parents did. This is what my grandparents did.
Exactly. And yeah, boys can't cry, boys can't be like upset. They have to man up. Yeah, no, absolutely. We need to raise our kids better to to be able to feel, to be able to stand up, to do all of it.
But it's a beautiful thing that we're able to actually come together as women to have these type of conversations, because and it actually goes to something that Sam was asking yesterday, which was, do we see any changes that are happening in our society? Because even as 10 years ago, we weren't having conversations were happening, but they weren't as open. And now I'm not going to say that it is more accepted, but they're not still happening everywhere. And to go to some of the things that you were all talking about. And so Audrey mentioned a video. For anyone who's a Facebook friend, I'm actually really purposeful in my Facebook friends. I don't friend everyone. I don't want to be everybody's friend. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to say I'm close friends with everybody I'm Facebook friends with, but so forth, let's go. So I posted something because I feel like there is so much negativity that happens in our society that my own calling on my life, I'm purpose driven, and my purpose is to put out as many positive experiences as possible, and not to put my highlight reel on social media, but also put certain things that I'm going through, that I'm experiencing. And yesterday was a great experience. And I was talking about my experience as with women. And even as far as 10 years ago, I looked at most women as the enemy. And leading to something that I'm not sure who said it today. These are enculturated practices, right? Like women, you have to like pink, and boys, you have to like blue. And enculturation is what we learn as within our society. Like these are norms, but just because they become normalized doesn't mean that they're normal. Just like, oh, guys, you need to not cry. These are toxic practices that we're passing on to our little boys. So then they're not understanding how to show emotion in healthy ways. And then that manifests in other ways. So it's so important for us to be able to have these conversations and come to the table as different ways that we approach situations. As women, we support each other, but we're applying our life experience in different ways. And it helps break down that enculturated practices. And then we're creating new narratives within these dysfunctional stories. So then we're giving now representation to a new way of being and addressing questions, because some people are like, well, this is how I grew up. Okay, well, you grew up using a diaper, but you don't use a diaper anymore, right? So that means that there's growth, that's evolution. So it's just like, and this sounds silly, but if you take little pieces and then you apply it, and that's to me what community wellness is, having conversations and pushing and not shaming people, but allowing the space for people to be able to learn, like, oh, I guess I didn't realize that. Okay.
I feel like this flows to, you know, that what we were talking about in the first half, where we don't want to tolerate other women, but we want to accept them. And I feel like we put people into these boxes, right? You know, like she has too many boyfriends, she's a whore. She wears blue jeans and a sweatshirt, she's a tomboy. She wears dresses, she's a girly girl. She likes to wear makeup, she's, you know, pretentious. You know, we put people into these boxes, whereas maybe she likes to wear makeup, but maybe she also likes to go rock climbing. You know, you know, people aren't able to be fit into these boxes. And if you
Right.
really accept people for who they are, accept women for who they are and their subtle
Right.
differences, then maybe you might be able to see deeper.
It's also
You know,
like, why do
yeah.
you care? Like, let people just be.
So, you know, it's interesting when you say in the last 10 years, because as we've been talking, I went to a women's college and I was there 25 years ago. And I remember one of the things we always, because it was I went to Leslie when it was still a college, when it was still a women's college. Yay, Leslie. But it was a very tiny campus. And one of the things that, you know, the question was always, well, what do you do without boys? Like, what do you do? And one of the things we loved, because it was a very tiny school, is our dorms were upstairs from our classroom. So and that isn't to say this was everyone, because obviously not everybody wanted a boy, but their pressure was off to go to class. Like, we would just roll out of bed. I mean, we would just roll out of bed in our pajamas. People would, I mean, I know college students still do that, but like
Even easier.
being on, there was like such a different vibe in the classroom, because you didn't need to be on because you weren't concerned about impressing anyone, but you also weren't competing with that male energy. And there was competition amongst the females, but we were having conversations like this. I think that was the first time I learned and started to be comfortable with the word feminist. But it was its own bubble. I mean, this was the early 90s. And the fact that I left that college experience and then went back into the workforce, and I worked in a predominantly male environment right after that, was a total switch and a total change. In your defenses go back up again. And then so I think there have been bubbles and pockets of it throughout time, but because it's not the norm, I think that's what we're trying to transition, and that they're not unique situations, and that we're expanding that there are less women's colleges, and maybe then now it's our society that's becoming those safe spaces for those conversations.
That's funny, because I always heard women dress for other women, and they don't, not for the men.
Both, I guess.
Maybe it's what age you are too. I mean, we were 18, so maybe it was.
I think the more comfortable you become with yourself, and like the more real you become with yourself, the more then that tends to diminish. I use my 10-year span, because when I moved back to Massachusetts, it was almost 10 years ago. And at Leslie, I all the lessons I learned up to that point, and then 4 years ago, I started at Leslie, and I was around women who are just dynamic. And this is women who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s. I have a mentor who's in her 70s, and she is just so on it. I'm like, can I be like you when I grow up? So it took me being able to be in this environment, like with former Mayor Lisa Wong. I love her. And she would tell me stories when she was mayor, and we still connect even now, where people were like, well, you're not a woman because you don't do this, you don't do that. She's like, well, I'm trying to get things done, and you're concerned with how I look? Are you serious? And it's just like, but it's also a learning process, because if that has been your enculturated practice and you don't see different or don't know different, then you're going to perpetuate the same, and that's your norm. So it's like, we have to disrupt that. And how do we disrupt that? We disrupt the norm, and we create and show other ways of being. So I think by us showing other people, like, well, we can be women, and we can all, because we all have our distinctive styles. And just because Sam rocks in one way and she prepares and she does one thing, it doesn't mean that any other woman is less than. It means that this is how Sam is, and it means that this is how Jessie is, and it means that this is how Audrey is, and this is how I'm choosing to show up. And it doesn't diminish our womanhood. If anything, it accentuates it, and it offers other people to be able to understand the same thing and be able to step into their own womanhood, you know?
It's amazing the tightrope that women in politicians have to walk compared to male politicians.
Yep.
You know, it feels like it's very easy for mostly women and then men to hate other women politicians, like for not really any reason other than, oh, I hate the way she talks, or I hate her voice, or I can't stand her, those kinds of words. But you never hear those kinds of statements with men politicians, or
It
very
is
rarely.
so true. And Sam, I mean, this is not rehearsed, everybody who's watching. So, and I know this is not the capacity of which you're on, but Sam, as you being a city council at large. So we were talking, I mean, there was a conversation talking about Sam's legs versus her makeup. And it was about city council. And I walked, because I was coming to get tacos, and I was just like, are you guys serious? You're not talking about any of the men and how they look, but you're talking about how this woman looks and not whether or not she's effective or not.
Mm.
And it's just like, are you kidding? Are you kidding?
Oh, yeah, women, you know, I mean, talking about me, I get the, oh, you're just putting yourself out there. Oh, you just take selfies to promote yourself. Like, you know, like, well, no, I take a picture of me in front of a place because that's what Facebook likes. Social media likes a face in front of a place, and then they'll promote it. It's part of the algorithm. And it helps you people all to see these awesome things that's going on in Fitchburg. But you never hear that with the man. There'll be all kinds of political, even locally, pictures of men photoshopped in front of places they've never been. And that's okay. No one ever talks about he's just looking for attention for himself.
And this is not male bashing, but let's even turn what you just said on its ear. Who cares if you're taking a picture and you're promoting yourself? Why is it that women can't promote ourselves? Why have we put ourselves in such a box of society that it's negative to promote ourselves? It's not like you're only promoting yourself. You're promoting yourself in Fitchburg in a positive light. Oh my gosh.
So, you know, segueing on, you know,
Wait,
why is
can I add to that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So it struck me, I mean, you know, regardless of how you feel about her politics, but it struck me that in 2020, when Kamala Harris was doing the vice president debates, that she didn't have a whole lot of representation of a woman running for, you know, in a presidential or vice presidential debate in the final, you know, against the other party. Her only like examples were Hillary Clinton and Sarah Palin. And it struck me that like she was, you know, in 2020, she's still like trying to navigate that of like, I want to be seen as strong, confident, competent, the right person for the job. But also I have to watch, like, am I laughing too much? Am I smiling too much? Is my voice going up too much? Like fortunately, there are more female politicians that are becoming more popular in the mainstream, or more we're becoming more aware of. You know, we've got the Squad, we've got AOC, and we've got Ayanna Pressley. We're seeing all these different kinds of women. Like, you don't have to dress a certain way. You don't have to have Hillary Clinton's haircut and wear pantsuits. Like, you don't have to act like one of the men. Like, you can, like, women are starting to be allowed to be themselves and be in power as themselves, versus the pioneers kind of had to like struggle with that of being accepted for who they are, and how the public was going to take them.
I feel like Kamala isn't being accepted for who she is even today. You know, you don't hear about her record or her particular stances on things. You hear about how she slept her way to the top, or, you know, she's just a nasty woman, you know, who has, you know, behind the scenes, she's a terrible, terrible woman. And she's, you know, a whore. She, you know, these women only terms that you would use. You'd never talk about a man, you know, sleeping with someone to get anywhere. Never.
Oh, I filtered those people out of my Facebook.
Not me. I see them all the time.
But you still have to navigate that weird, that shaky line between being too aggressive and speaking your truth. And I think that's something Kamala has had to do. I think every person in public life has to do, because you want to be heard, but you don't want to be coming across as too forceful and angry. Because and bossy, yes, because if you are asserting your opinion, well, you're just
difficult.
You're very difficult. Yes, you're difficult. You're not. It's, as a woman, you're expected to be nice, and if you're not nice, you're something horrible. There's a whole number of other expletives that you are, and if you're not nice enough to listen to the man who is obviously, it isn't even just the man, because other women do it to other women, right, who just want to over explain and explain and explain and tell you, little girl, what you really need to know, and then you can speak your piece if I feel like listening.
And of course, like Kamala and other Black female politicians have to worry about the like angry Black woman stereotype of being just put in that box of like, oh, like pish posh for just being the angry Black woman. Like nothing that you're saying is like should be angering like everyone.
But it's not only in politics. I mean, but I agree with you. I mean, let's take it into the rural context of leadership and how being a leader in our small but still potent community is. I am a woman who identifies as an African American. I identify as Black. I also identify as BIPOC, Black Indigenous person of color. And it happens where, I mean, I have walked into certain places, and it happens even today, where people will look at me and they're like, oh, all right, she's going to be a problem. Like, I haven't even said anything yet. Like, I literally, you don't know that. And it's just the preconception of how women are perceived, and then the layering of the intersections of dysfunction. Okay, well, in my case, I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman, because often I braid my hair, oh, she's a thug. And these are just messages that have been perpetrated and perpetuated throughout our society. And in some circles, they have become normalized. So it's like, again, I'm not being false in my appreciation of Sam and others who allow for conversations like this, because it is one way of being able to address this in a healthy way and bring different perspectives together.
All right, on that, segueing right off your how to address this, let's close the show like we did in the first half with kind of some action steps. You know, what are some things that we can do? What are some of the things that we can all do, men and women and everyone else, you know, to help kind of, you know, make everything more equitable and inclusive?
I never underestimate the power of listening, and I think it goes both ways, because I think it's welcoming people into the conversation and listening, but I think it's also because I can say when I am called out for being too aggressive, I get flustered and I go into defensive mode. So I think that's a point where, as frustrating as it is that I have to do extra work, by listening and seeing what is it that I can help them see my point of view without coming across as angry. But the responsibility has to be on both sides. It's not, I don't want to put the burden all on the women. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Listening to others and and giving them, welcoming them a seat at the table. When you are trying to diversify your committees, don't just choose one person to represent. Try to get multiple. I have been fortunate to be asked to be on multiple committees, but I often find that I'm the only Asian woman there, or I'm the only, and which is very awkward for me, because I'm like, I don't think I can represent like everyone. And on that note, when Kenisha was talking about the struggles that she has as a Black woman, like as an Asian woman, as a woman, you know, we're supposed to be nice, as Jessie said, but as an Asian person, like we're thought of as being subservient. So it's like really like, how do I cater those, like, you know, how do I show that I'm a strong person without like coming off as, you know, as mean or rude or too straightforward. So that's a tricky thing, but yeah, listening to everyone, and you know, like men struggle in the patriarchy as well. We put a lot of expectations on men as well.
Yeah.
So that's something to be aware of and to
That's a whole nother show.
oh yeah, that's a whole nother thing. But what I'm trying to say is like, men, you have stakes in this too, of like feminism is good for everyone. Everyone should be a feminist. It just means that like everyone should be treated equal, but also like stop caring so much about like what other people are doing and like how they look, how they act. Like just appreciate who they are. I've been embracing the concept of like positive jealousy. I remember seeing all these like photos and videos of my cousin like going out mountain climbing, going to all these amazing, incredible places, and they're super athletic. Something that I'm like, oh, I would make it like at the bottom of that hill. That's cool. Like you go like rock climb like 360 degrees, like I don't know, you're crazy. And it was a joy to say like, I'm so jealous of all the things that you're doing. I know that that's something that I couldn't do. I know that I have made my choices of like, I can't afford to go on those vacations, whatever, but I'm so happy for you. It's a happy jealousy of like, rather than feeling like, oh, this is so unfair, it's like, you're doing you, and that's amazing. That's fantastic.
Catch yourself when you're judging people and reframe your thoughts into more of those of support.
Yes, and expose yourself to more representation of leaders that you want to be like. I know that can be really hard. There's not a whole lot, but if you curate what you're watching and what who you interact with, you'll have like a better frame of how can I be like that?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We're coming to the end of our time here. Is there any last statement you'd like to make, Kenisha?
Again, thank you for having us. I invite people for their consideration to investigate their story. It's easy to get stuck in your story on, oh, this person looks like this person thinks like this, without even having the interaction. And there isn't any shame in just checking out, well, why do I believe this? Why do I think this? Why have I been telling myself this about this person? Just because one person might have done that doesn't mean that all people are going to be like that. And that helps you be a better ally. We need more allies. This isn't a man bashing. This is a commingling of women and being able to support each other. But we need men's support. And we're here for men too. That's one of the beautiful things about Women's History Month. It's like looking at our ancestral women and being able to apply that in our society. It uplifts us, but like a boat, when water rises, we are all rising. So it's important for us to see how we're rising, what are we rising to, and how do we do that in a healthy way.
Men are 49% of the population, so we need your help, men.
We need your help.
All right. Well, thank
Men
you
are
so much,
important too.
everyone, for coming on and chatting with us about Women's History Month. And thank you at home for paying attention and watching to see everything good that's going on in Fitchburg. We will be back with another show in another week. All right. Have a good one.
Bye.